April 1945. American soldiers were moving through southern Germany. They had been told they would find a prison camp outside the town of Dachau. What they found instead would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The gates were open. No resistance came from inside. But as the soldiers moved forward, something struck them before they saw anything: the smell. It was unlike anything they had encountered in years of war. Sweet, heavy, and wrong in a way that could not be described. Then they saw the train. 40 boxcars sat on the tracks just outside the main enclosure. Inside each one were bodies, hundreds of them, stacked and twisted, frozen in the positions they had died in. These were prisoners who had been transported to Dachau from other camps as the Nazi system collapsed. They never made it inside. They died on the tracks, in sealed cars, without food or water, over days of movement across a broken country. The soldiers who reached those cars did not speak. There was nothing to say. Dachau had not always been a place of mass death. It was the first concentration camp established by the Nazi regime, opened in March 1933, just weeks after Hitler came to power. Its original purpose was political imprisonment. Communists, journalists, priests, and anyone considered a threat to the new government were brought here first. Over the following years, its function expanded. It became a model. Other camps across occupied Europe were designed and operated using Dachau as a reference. What began as a detention facility slowly transformed into something else entirely, a place where survival was not expected and where the conditions of daily life were themselves a form of punishment. By 1945, Dachau held far more prisoners than it was ever built for. Overcrowding was total. The infrastructure had broken down completely under the weight of thousands more people than the camp could manage. What American forces walked into was a system in its final hours of collapse. The barracks were filled beyond capacity. Prisoners lay on wooden shelves, stacked 3 and 4 levels high, too weak to sit upright. The floors were covered with men who had fallen and could not rise again. Typhus had moved through the population for months. It spread through the lice in every piece of clothing and bedding. Dysentery followed water supplies that no longer functioned. Tuberculosis worked quietly through lungs already weakened by years of starvation. The sick lay beside the dying and the dead because there was no longer any capacity to separate them. Food rations had stopped arriving regularly weeks before liberation. Whatever remained was distributed unevenly, often not at all. A man who had survived 3 years of imprisonment could die in the final days from starvation alone, within sight of the moment the war would end. Medical care inside the camp had existed only on paper. What little equipment had been present was gone. Prisoners who became seriously ill were not treated. They waited. American units moved quickly to secure the camp and establish control. Military medical teams were called forward immediately. Temporary hospitals were constructed using tents and nearby buildings. Nurses and doctors began working through the barracks, identifying who could be moved and who had to be treated where they lay. The risk of infection was severe. Medical staff operated under protective precautions, but many were still exposed. The environment itself was the danger. Everything, the ground, the structures, the air inside the barracks, carried disease. At the same time, orders were given to detain every SS guard and administrative worker still present. Some had attempted to flee before the Americans arrived. Others remained at their posts. A number tried to change into civilian clothing or blend into the population of the camp. Most were caught. Survivor testimony began almost immediately. Prisoners who could speak identified guards by face. They described specific acts, beatings administered on particular days, selections carried out at roll call, punishments that had no official justification. These accounts were recorded and would later form the basis of legal proceedings. After liberation, the physical structures of Dachau were documented in detail. Photographs were taken in every section. Film crews recorded the barracks, the crematorium, and the faces of the survivors. American military leadership made a deliberate decision to preserve this evidence, understanding that without it, what had happened here might one day be questioned. Surviving prisoners were transferred to proper medical facilities as quickly as possible. Many were too fragile to be moved safely. Recovery, where it came, was slow. Accountability followed. A military tribunal was held. Those responsible for the operation of Dachau were tried individually. Evidence was presented. Verdicts were delivered. Several were executed. What remained after all of it was a site, a name, and a record. Dachau today stands as a memorial, open, documented, and preserved, not to honor what happened there, but to ensure that it cannot be forgotten. Because forgetting in this case is not an accident, it is a choice, and some choices must never be made.